fell off, and so I hope that you're back, and we're ready to go. So, yay, green checks. We're back. Thank you. So we're still talking about change in the individual. So just real quick to summarize, we talked about learning, and we talked about learning being different than teaching, and we talked about different preferences for learning and the cycle established by Kolb, and then the labels that we gave to that cycle: activist, theorist, reflector, theorist, and pragmatist, that was provided by Honey and Mumford. And the important things there is understanding that we need to have different kinds or different opportunities of learning and entice people to go or take or acquire those different types of learning, because from what both researchers have stated is that all of the four modes are needed to fully engage and fully learn something. We talked about the unconscious competence model, so that we start out not knowing what we don't know or being unconsciously incompetent, and then finding out there are things that we need to know and not having had any training yet, being consciously incompetent. And then going forth and having training but not necessarily being fluid in what we're doing yet, and that being consciously competent. So we are able to do it, but we have to think about it. And then when we've mastered the new activity, becoming unconsciously competent again. It's just we do it. We don't need to have any instruction sheets. We talked about the Kubler-Ross change curve, and we talked about the change model, or the transition model that comes from William Bridges and written in William Bridges' book. So we're moving on to motivation, what drives and motivates people. There are numbers of research or studies done on what drives and motivates people, and typically we're talking about now in the workplace, what motivates people in the workplace, and what doesn't motivate or maybe even demotivates people in the workplace. So as part of change in the individual, we talk about motivation in terms of Maslow. So you see Maslow 1943, and Maslow said that there are 5 levels, a hierarchy of 5 levels that people kind of go through in terms of performance, if you will, but also in their emotional state of where they are with their needs. And what this is saying, or what Maslow has said, is that a person cannot move from one level to another. So for instance, if they are at the lowest level, physiological needs, they cannot move to the next level, safety needs, until they're fully fulfilled at that lower level. So in this case, we definitely are looking at a sequential going from bottom to top, versus I had mentioned in Kubler-Ross, you could skip steps and all, or maybe not even go through that curve. When we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what he's talking about in terms of the bottom, physiological needs, are those things that we need really to sustain life. So shelter and food and clothing. So those are your physiological or most basic needs. Going up a level, what he has talked about is safety needs. Another word for safety needs is security. So do people feel safe? Do they feel safe in their space, in their environment? And do they feel secure in that they will continue to be able to meet those physiological needs? Going up to the next level, Maslow termed this as love needs, or also another word for that is social. So our ability to relate to and be socially accepted by and to connect and collaborate with others. So love or social needs. Going up a level, the next level is esteem needs. And what that is about is getting recognition. So having your self-esteem fulfilled by recognition by others that you've done a good job. And then finally, this highest level, self-actualization. That's really mastery. That's being the best that you can be with the particular skill set or gifts that you've been given. So over on the left, it says a musician must make music, artist must paint, poet must write. To be ultimately happy, we need to master those set of skills that are important to us, and again, that go along with our gifts. Now, in your book, if you're referencing in your book, this is chapter 1, section B, subsection, I guess, 3.1, and on page 17. Your book really doesn't say anything much more than what I've already said related to this. Now, this is talking about physiological needs I mentioned in terms of clothing and all. So in the work world, you could put this into the chat, or actually, if you want, why don't you type right on the screen? So if you want, declare space in the work world, okay. What would we equate with physiological needs? PC, desk, workspace. How about the job? Is the job itself with pay actually get to the physiological needs in terms of being able to provide shelter and food? Can we relate to that? It's pretty much more the job itself in the work world tends to be towards the physiological needs, or making people know that they can meet their basic needs. Okay. The next bit on the slide says a lower level need down at the bottom has power to motivate behavior until it is sufficiently satisfied. Then the next higher category of need tends to take over. So let's just imagine for a bit that people are told or afraid that they might lose their jobs. So there's an element of safety needs and physiological needs there. And we come along and say, we're going to implement this new software so that you can have a new business process and be able to do something new. Where do you think their mind is at? Anybody want to raise your hand or just type in the chat? Impact on their job, replacements or cuts. So yes, so it's the impact on them individually. So they're not with you. They can't think about, or they can't participate, or they're going to resist the change that you want to make when they are not certain that they'll continue to have income and that there's a possibility if they will lose their job. Now, one of the things that we need to think about with people in terms of hierarchy of needs as well, we won't have an understanding sometimes of some of the things that are challenging them outside of the workplace that might actually challenge their safety needs or physiological needs. The point being is when we see people resisting some of the changes that we want them to make, there might be things that are getting in the way that they really have no control over if they are feeling threatened that their most basic needs are not met. And so it's not something from a personal information or HR perspective. We go ask people what's going on outside of your world. But we know, line managers know, again, something to consider in terms of motivation to support the change that you need to make or that you're asking them to make. Has anybody, green check means yes. Oh, Alice, you have your hand raised. Do you want to speak up on that?
Yes, one of the things that I observe is when people are already feeling, and I think this is physiological, I kind of want to check this. People are already feeling overwhelmed, they're overworked, they're stressed, they feel like they don't have the resources that they need in order to do their job. And we come along and suggest that we're going to do something differently. Beyond people being concerned about whether or not that means their job becomes redundant, I think there's also a concern of, I already barely get through the day, and now you're suggesting I'm going to do something different. Would that be in the physiological category, or where does that sit?
It could. I don't know if these are cut and dry. It might be there. It might be safety or security. So it's the security, because security could actually be a broad net of things too. So let me just read that to you, what's in the book. For safety, security represent the need for an orderly, secure world with a low level of perceived threat to life and the future. This includes the reasonable expectation that my physiological needs will be met tomorrow as well as today. It's symbolized for many in personal and work routines. Given that definition out of the book, can you, does that make more sense that it might actually be more tied towards the safety in that it's, you're expanding your mindset beyond what you normally do, but yet, even though it's a strain, you could still meet the paycheck and the job.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess it's fear. So I guess the fact that it is a fear would then put it in that category. That makes sense. Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. I actually was observing, I don't know if any of you know anything about spinning, meaning in a gym class on a bike and spinning. One of the things about spinning, it's not about the exercise and how much you sweat and all that. In many cases, it's about which bike you get, which sounds a little bit silly, but people, me including, get very territorial about their bike. And so it's not their bike, it's first come, first served for these bikes, but it's your feeling that it's your spot, it's your space, it's your comfort zone. I watched somebody one day who came in and somebody else was on, and I'm doing air quotes, her bike, and really became flustered and tried to, went to one bike to another bike to another bike to another bike and didn't like any of them and said the safety straps didn't work right on one, which they did, but she didn't take the time to check it out. And I said, well, here's the bike right here. You can sit next to me. And I'm trying to extend the love or the social element. And again, she was just entirely flustered. And I sat there and pondered. And I went, oh, wait a minute. She is feeling at a loss of something. And I wasn't sure if it was the physiological needs or the safety needs. And I kind of had gone down to the root of physiological needs. But after reading that paragraph, and Alice, after you asking this question too, I kind of think it was more those safety, the routine or personal space that actually she felt a loss of, and then couldn't even, focus on me trying to connect with her from a more of a social aspect. So these things are they're not cut and dry. They are for the purposes of an exam, just to know the levels, but it's something really more for putting radar up, helping understand. So let's look at what Rich has said. No matter how high up the pyramid you are at any given moment in time, a lower need may supersede. Fight or flight situation forces us down to the bottom levels. So yes, we could be really feeling great with recognition and we've got status and everything's going good with STEAM needs. That doesn't mean we stay there forever. If all of a sudden we're feeling the redundancy and that there's a potential a job, we could, our mind, and I like that Rich put in there, fight or flight, and a lot of times it's not really control over. Our mind goes right down into those basic needs, and that's the point of this. So that's Maslow, and it's understanding it and how understanding something that has been out here since 1943 relates to the job environment and relates to where people's minds are in terms of negative things that could be happening to them. I actually, as an example, and some of my Pink Elephant comrades who are in class these couple of days might have had this happen to them as well, and some of the others of you in going out and teaching a class in an organization. I've actually had it happen where the people in my class were being told of organizational changes which could relate to layoffs and all of that while taking class. So what do you think? Green means yes and check means no. I got through, they learned my course material. Green check means yes, red X means no. Yeah, it was kind of me talking to the walls and feeling really bad. I can empathize with all of that, but it was kind of a waste of their time and money given the circumstances. So real quick, went down to the safety and physiological. So safety or security needs from a job perspective could be feeling safe that your job will remain intact, that you will remain getting the paycheck, and that your physiological needs are protected. So that's how those relate to each other in this particular pyramid. Now, a different look at motivation from a completely different source or different set of circumstances comes from Hertzberg. So Hertzberg, Frederick Hertzberg is a famous research job. Actually was looking at job satisfaction, and he was doing surveys and gave people a list of items and had them rate them on what they would consider something that would make them satisfied with their job long term. Not really satisfied with their job for the next week, but satisfied long term, and therefore would be a high performer and would be somebody who would be good for retention of their job. So from this list of elements, he took the answers and put them in two camps, if you will. He put them in two lists. The first list is extrinsic, and extrinsic means the item, the bullet in this case, is outside of the content of the job. So it exists outside the job itself or the content of the job. These extrinsic list of items he called dissatisfiers. So these are items that could, if something goes wrong with them, they could quickly make somebody dissatisfied and maybe want to leave the job or leave the company. And they don't necessarily, if things go right with them, actually add to the person's feeling of long-term satisfaction. Another term or another name that he gave to them is hygiene. So it seems kind of, I don't really exactly know where that came from, that hygiene, but three different words: extrinsic, dissatisfier, and hygiene, that are on this side that is lower job satisfaction. In terms of this list, company policy, administration, supervision, working conditions. And here's an item on this list that I actually we're going to put it on its own line, and it actually is in your book on its own line: salary. Which do you think, wouldn't you think that salary would be a long-term motivator for people to want to stay with the company and to perform well? What do you think about salary? Why is it on this side? Anybody?
I'm not sorry, Robin. I'm not sure I understand your question.
Why would you think salary is a dissatisfier and not something that would make people go, whoa, yay, and make them satisfied?
I'll wait till someone else may want to answer.
Okay, thank you for asking me to clarify. Sherry?
I think that salary is one of those things that's more similar to like a physiological need. You have to have it, and if it's there, you don't even think about it. But if it's not there, and for example, if you know that new people coming in are coming in at a much higher salary than you, or you've got opportunities externally that are considerably different, then I think it becomes an issue, in which case that would be a dissatisfier with your current, where you're currently at.
Yes, good points. So salaries, as long as it's reasonable, is not something that we're overly concerned with. And salary really doesn't give a person long-term commitment and long-term satisfaction with the job. I mean, typically after you get a raise and you get more money in your wallet, what do you really want? You want more money. And so it's a temporary satisfaction, not a long-term satisfaction. Other items on this list, all the relationships. So we already mentioned relationships with supervisor, but also with peers or subordinates, personal life, status, security. So they don't tend to lead towards long-term job satisfaction, but anything that goes wrong with them could have us pull down and be dissatisfied quickly. In terms of work, people, you've probably heard said even multiple times, people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. So that's a relationship entity with peers or subordinates if they're unhappy with that manager. On the other side of the fence, what people, when the survey responded to in what makes them happy, when Hertzberg put all of these items in a list and looked at them and compared them, he said these are all really intrinsic. They are part of the job content itself. And he calls these intrinsic factors motivators. So they tend to lead to higher job satisfaction or higher long-term job satisfaction. And actually, this list is in pretty much, the list on the right anyway, is in pretty much rank order of the number of people or percentage of people that responded for each of these being a satisfier. So the ability to show that you're achieving, recognition, and recognition doesn't have to be huge salary recognition. It could be publicly stating so-and-so did a good job. And actually, even you don't have to give big bonuses on recognitions. A lot of time, the movie tickets or money for going out for lunch or whatever, that could be part of recognition as well. The actual work, whether you like the work, the job content or not. So if you like what you do, you are more likely to be satisfied in that job or in that work for longer periods of time. Having responsibility, and even with that having responsibility is also not having somebody breathe down your neck, watching every step that you make. The ability or the opportunities for advancement or promotion and the opportunities for growth. So personal, professional development. One of the things when we were talking about the learning, and somebody said one of the negative, Skinner and all of that, one of the negative would be not having the ability to get professional development, go to courses, go to seminars. And so here we're seeing that it is seen as something very positive. So that's part of what motivates people. And so as we're going through change programs, as they're pulling people along, we could use this to our good too by helping them along, giving them a part to play in terms of being more responsible or in helping to create the solution or develop the solution that might enhance their enjoyment of the job content. So that's all Hertzberg. Well, I actually started the whole salary bit, but in most managers, where do you think they place salary? Even though we had the discussion about it, put your bar on there, your arrow where you think most managers place salary. Yeah. We think that we'll just give them more money. We'll give them more money, and then they'll stay. Yep. Yeah, one of the things that I'm starting to question about my knowledge of change management and my knowledge of some of these things is my status or my level in the whole baby boomer, Gen X, millennial kind of sequence or levels. And I'm wondering more about millennials and what they think about some of these things. I read something recently from white paper that I got off of a company webpage, and it said that millennials, in terms of job satisfaction, know whether they are going to stay long-term in a job. There was a certain percentage, let's just for grins say 15% within the first week, and something higher, let's say 40% within the first month, know whether they're going to be happy in this job or this company or not, which kind of was, wow, scary to me, especially comparing it to the cost for being able to hire somebody. Another thing with millennials in this particular article was that if a boss asks somebody, and this is just generally speaking, to remove or delete their Facebook page, that they might quit on the spot. So this is all research as well from a different place. Kim, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to ask about millennials because this set of standards does not seem to apply to the people that work for me that are. So just wondering where the research was on that, and if somebody's going to go back and go, oh, this has been our understanding for everybody up until we got to this generation, and now we have to throw that out and kind of go, it's different.
Yeah, so I'm just citing a short, like 9-page white paper article that I read with some research that, again, I got it from a website that sells software for HR, like time management kind of systems. And the other thing in discussions about that too, so this is kind of beyond what you need to know, but it's intriguing me, and obviously at least Kim is intriguing you as well, is generally speaking, at least we think millennials want this advancement very quickly. And so this whole area, this whole area of advancement right here, and I don't have any research to cite for this, but they want, what's my next promotion? What's my next promotion? What's my next promotion? Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right, Chuck. I tend to agree with what you just stated there, that probably for millennials, personal life is coming to this list right here. At least that's my perception, and I don't have any research to back it up. But there's two of us now, Chuck and Robin, who are thinking that's the case. All right. Yeah, a better balance of work and personal, and advancement goes to the top. My research, my daughters, yeah. Yeah. All right, great conversation. Thank you for jumping in, all of you. This is Hertzberg research now, and this is 2003. And more recently, we have Daniel Pink, who wrote a book called Drive. If you've ever been to just a couple of the Pink Elephant conferences in the past, he's actually been a keynote at a couple of the Pink Elephant conferences. But Daniel Pink's book called Drive basically says for knowledge workers. So let's just be clear on this. For knowledge workers, there are 3 key motivators. And here's what I mean here. If you are a person who works like transactions, like that are monitored and measured, and you need to do 50 in a day, and you aren't really supposed to think out of the box, just follow the directions that you're given, and you're going to be quality control that you did follow those directions, like in check processing or something like that. These 3 motivators don't really apply, because that's not the type of work. But for knowledge workers, people like you who are developing programs and who are innovative, these are the 3 motivators that Daniel Pink, speaks about in his book and in his research, and in actually a YouTube video that's out there that kind of highlights the contents of the book. Autonomy. People like to be self-directed with a high degree of freedom to decide the direction, methods, and circumstances of the work. Doesn't mean that management should just give them carte blanche, go do what you want. There needs to be some constraints, some deadlines, some kind of, here's the requirements for what this work needs to produce. But after that, let people get to or arrive at the solution without all of the looking over their shoulder. So autonomy. The second is mastery. People like to do things well. When they value things, they want to excel at them. They want to become a master. They want to grow. They want to develop. So this is tied to that liking the work, that intrinsically motivating work. And then the third is purpose. People like to feel that their work has meaning and value and will choose to invest themselves in activities they consider worthwhile. So let me see if I could phrase this question for all of you. Have you ever either experienced or seen someone experience work that you would call busy work, in that once you produced something, it was kind of put on the shelf and never really looked at again? Green check means yes, red X means no. Green check. Anybody want to talk about that? We don't have our couch out to kind of do psychotherapy for you or anything, but anybody want to talk about how that felt? Or how you perceived someone else to feel? Raise your hand. That bad. Nobody wants to talk about it. All right. Well, I'll talk about a good situation. So in my experience, as I mentioned early on, I was brought back to Pink Elephant this summer, and I was given some direction to roll out this particular course or set of courses. In that, there were a lot of stage gates to go through, in that we needed a PowerPoint deck, and we needed, I needed to pass the exams that you're taking. I needed to pass a knowledge interview, which is a one-on-one by phone, but personal interview. We needed to have the materials accredited. We needed to have a lot of things ready. So there were steps in there, but other than that, it was basically go do this. You have the autonomy to go and create and launch this course. Mastery, this is something I like. Hopefully you're sensing a bit of passion out of my voice as I'm talking with you. And in doing that, I was able to reread some of the books that I had read years ago in my master's program, or read additional books and be able to pull this all together in trying to express it in a way that you can understand. So becoming a master in this particular content area. And then definitely we had purpose. This is something that Pink Elephant wanted to do, expand its course offerings or its service offerings. So there was a very rich purpose for the organization. So all these three things in place, and I'll tell anybody, I'll tell management of Pink Elephant, it was the best summer of my entire career, actually working this way and seeing the fruits of my labor, if you will, in getting this work done. Anybody have a positive experience that they could say that they've been able to do work that's made them very happy, very satisfied, and catered to all of those three motivators? Anybody want to raise their hand and talk about something positive? No? All right. Then you hear about me. Okay. Oh, volunteer work. Yes. Yeah, volunteer work is good. Good. Thank you, Rich. Okay. So one of the things, I'm sorry, I'm moving back. I'm going back. One of the things with Daniel Pink is when you look at this with Daniel Pink, he actually was validating the list that Hertzberg produced in 2003. Daniel Pink came back in 2011, a few years later, and did that validation. So Rich says when helping the Help Desk Institute wrote a focus book saying that for IT people, top job motivators are control of time, training, and having the latest tools. Yeah, having the latest and greatest. Great, thanks, Rich, for putting that in there. All right, so that was Daniel Pink. Now, let's put some of these things together. So we talked about needing to learn something new, and we talked about being provided with different learning opportunities to learn new tools or learn new processes or learn about new jobs or roles or whatever that is. Sometimes when learning, people can get themselves kind of churned so that they get themselves where they can't move forward. A person by the name of Edgar Schein, who's written a number of books and many of them used in academia, writes about two anxieties. The first is learning anxiety. And what that is even though you've been provided the training, even though people are trying to coach, you might get yourself to a point where you just feel you can't get it. And you become anxious about the fact that you can't get it. So the statement here is the feeling of incompetence while trying to learn or improve a skill. In some cases, we might get to a point that we are so anxious about that we can't learn. We fail to learn. And when individuals are failing to learn, we could inhibit the change because we're not able to move forward. So that's learning anxiety. What we want to do with people who have learning anxiety is do the best of we can. We want to coach them and provide these learning opportunities. But we get to a point, or we could get to a point where they're kind of in the way of us moving forward with our change. So at some point we need to, and I'm kind of being crass here, but we need to kind of push them off the ledge. So they're on the ledge, push them over the ledge so that they could get beyond this learning anxiety. When we do that, we're creating a brand new anxiety. This brand new anxiety, oops. Why don't we do this in the chat? What can we do to help with their anxiety? What are one or two examples of what might make someone anxious when learning? You can throw that into the chat. A test. Alice, you just spoke for everybody. Performance expectations, yes. Yeah. They don't feel they have enough time, yes. Yeah. All of these things. They look at their neighbor and their neighbor's learning faster than them. New skills will be required. New people will have influence. Yeah. Interesting with new people will have influence. Sometimes new people come in and they learn faster than the people who have been there. Why might they learn faster than the people who have been there? Sherry?
Because they're not stuck in the old way of doing things.
Exactly. They don't have any unlearning that they need to do, and they're not holding on to old habits. All right, good. So what can we do to help with their anxiety? Hopefully we can help them through those bits. It's when we get to a certain point where the train's kind of left the station, we all need to move on, which is where I was saying we got to push them off the cliff. In pushing them off the cliff, this is called survival anxiety. So for survival anxiety, when we need to get on with it, we need to help people learn to unfreeze, meaning get out of being stuck in their mindset, as Allison has, and not holding on to old habits, as Julie's saying, and not tied to the old way, as Chuck is saying. So they need to unfreeze what they do or what they feel or their identity today. And to do that, we're creating a competing and greater anxiety. What we're doing, and this sounds kind of nasty in a way, but the first step is what Schein calls disconfirmation. We need to somehow create the belief, which could be disturbing to them, that the current position is not sustainable, that it's not working anymore. And it could be that it's not sustainable because we're growing. It's not sustainable because the old tools are going to be shut off at a given time. And if they can't perform in the new tools or the new processes, then they might be, they've got a problem. They're challenged. So disconfirmation is creating the disturbing belief that the current position is not sustainable. It's not working. Followed by creating a sense of guilt or anxiety about not changing. So the learning anxiety was that I can't learn, and now the creation of guilt is if I don't change, if I can't get beyond this, I won't achieve my goals. the negative consequences are serious, like I could lose my job, or my team or organization will fail in whatever their challenges are. So again, sounds nasty in a way, but the organization can't just keep catering to people. We need to help them, but we can't cater to them or else we'll never change. What Shine says after that, though, is we can't just leave them hanging out there. So we've pushed them over the edge. We've created this guilt or anxiety that's part of this survival anxiety. Then we need to give them, so here, what do you think people are feeling at this point? Yeah, helplessness. Yeah. Fear, helplessness. They could be like feeling like, you know, like in a spiral. I'm kind of imagining kind of a whirlpool spiral that they're going down. Insecurity. So yeah, resentment. So we can't let this go on too long. So basically we need to push them over the edge, yet we need to give them a safety net. So the third step is creation of psychological safety. So this is where we can sit down with them and say, okay, now we've pushed you over. Here's how we're going to help you. Through a clear plan, suitable support and coaching, designed to prevent the survival anxiety becoming too great, especially when you're getting to these words that you put in, fear, helplessness, insecurity, resentment. Otherwise, we would leave them totally paralyzed and not able to move any further. Have you had any learning anxiety challenges? I'll tell you mine, and then you can kind of jump in with yours. Downhill skiing. Not related to work, but learning anxiety when it comes to downhill skiing. What happens if I get to the top and get off the chairlift and I'm stuck? I'll freeze, I'll stay there. So somehow we need to, it is not acceptable. The current position is not sustainable. Somehow you have to work your way down the mountain. So how can you get help in getting down there? Anybody want to jump in and say that, now that we kind of gone through this, have you experienced something like this before or applied it that you would want to share an example? Yeah, Kim?
So I have one employee who pretty much self-acknowledges that anytime there's change, he freezes. He becomes so mired in anxiety that he just freezes the second you throw change at him. So I've learned that when dealing with him, and I'm not following all these steps correctly or in that order necessarily, but I have to take care to really explain how the change is going to impact him so that he'll actually listen, because his hearing shuts down. He can't even hear me at a certain point because he gets so embroiled in, what does this mean to me? He's stuck down that safety and physiological band pretty much permanently. So you just have to learn that, that is anxiety. It's normal. Everybody feels it to some degree. This individual just feels an enormous amount of it, and it's painful to watch.
Yeah, especially since you're going to predict it over and over again with the same person.
Thankfully, I've learned a little bit about, this is what's going to happen.
Right.
We know we're going to go there, so we just already have a plan in place.
Right. We're creatures of habit, aren't we, too? We like our comfort zone, and we do feel threatened if to a greater or lesser degree. That's why I highlighted that. We could feel threatened. And that could be that whole safety thing. Back with Maslow, it's maybe a safety kind of thing that you feel threatened in, not necessarily in his case, maybe that he'll lose his job or not, but that that he has to be taken out of his comfort zone. And that would be a threat to many people, actually. All right, so with this survival, thank you for that. With this survival and learning anxiety, so we've got the person through the disconfirmation, the creation of guilt. and we create the psychological safety, then what we're going to next, and kind of the book follows along with, I mean, we're actually following along with the book, is that in order to do that creation of psychological safety, we also have to establish a good relationship with this person or these people, which, Kim, it sounds like you've done for the long term with this individual. They've gone to, our book author has actually gone to and borrowed content from somebody by the name of Carl Rogers. And this content is on personal growth, and it's section 3.7 for the Kindle folks. And Chuck, I think it was you put out the spot, the big number before to help Rich out or whoever has it. But for personal growth, what this is saying is there's 3 core conditions for personal growth and change. And these core conditions are really set into the relationship that we have when we are working together. Carl Rogers is somebody who is, he's a negotiator. He's a facilitator of big meetings, and in your book it even says with organizations and governments that are in conflict. So he says he's held gatherings in conflict in South Africa, Northern Ireland, and basically what he's saying is to bring people together at the table where they can constructively or productively talk about or negotiate certain topics. You first have to develop the relationship and actually get some of the baggage out of the way. Now, this is going to happen where Kim said in the chat, resentment. This is where you need to kind of maybe mend fences with relationship. And so here's these 3 conditions. First, congruence. So as the person who is the leader, the change agent, the change manager, whoever is working with this person, they need to be authentic and genuine in the relationship. So this is where integrity comes in, developing a mutual trust between the people. So in that, what he's saying is that we need to be aware of our own thoughts and feelings, and even our own thoughts and feelings about the change, because people will figure you out. So if you're developing, or if you're trying to develop a relationship and you're kind of on the fence about the change yourself, you aren't being genuine in that relationship. The second is called unconditional positive regard. So that's accepting and not judging someone else. So making sure that we're not saying, you know, that in order to be acceptable in my eyes, you should do this, or why don't you do that? It's taking somebody at face value and knowing that maybe they come from a different perspective, but that at least for this meeting, this relationship, I will not judge. And then the third element here is empathy. So a willingness to understand another person. That doesn't mean change our minds, and it doesn't mean sympathize with the other person, but to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of another person and understand them from their own frame of reference. Now, could you imagine this in a negotiation with the warring parties in, let's say, Northern Ireland? A lot of times coming to the table, there were personality conflicts, and people really did hate each other. So what this negotiation needed to do is really put that aside, because by not putting that aside and dealing with it in this way, there would be no way that they could talk productively about the actual content of the meeting, because these other elements would get in the way. So again, Kim, I'm glad you threw resentment into the chat, because as we're going down through all of this and we are the communicator that change is happening, there could be resentment that would reflect on us personally, and yet we as the people who are managing the change situation need to be able to establish this relationship with people in terms of the trust factor, and here are 3 elements of personal growth to do this. So offering these core conditions to colleagues and subordinates plays a major role in creating that psychological safety that we discussed in the last slide in terms of the behavioral and learning anxieties. So let me just now test again. Green check means yes. Red X means no. All of this that we just learned about Shine and this Carl Rogers with personal growth, does this seem like something that you could use in your organization and in terms of helping to push a change along? Green check means yes, red X means no. Yeah, I think nobody's going to say no, but you can if that's what you're thinking. Good. So content that you can already take away and work with in terms of helping people along through the changes that we're asking them to make. Let's do this class discussion here, and this is by raise of hand. So which approaches to motivating individuals seem to work best when managing change in an organization? So we went through motivation in terms of the Hertzberg with the dissatisfiers and the satisfiers, and then adding on the Pink, the Daniel Pink, and then talking about, throwing them off the ledge. So which approaches or any other approach that you'd want to reference have worked for you in terms of motivating people towards your change? Hands? Anybody?
One of the things that I've used quite often is getting the people who are going to be impacted by the change actually involved in helping to define some of the more specific components of the change. And once they feel,
yeah, so then it becomes part of their idea.
So they've got the sense of ownership.
Very good.
Very
good, including the people who are somewhat confrontational too, right? The people who are the negative people who cause you to hit your head against the wall, bring them into it as well, right? Alice, anything you wanted to jump in with? Your hand up for a moment.
I was going to say actually something very similar, and it's the sense of being done with as opposed to being done to. And sometimes, and I'm sure this is true in any sector, but I can only relate it to healthcare. There are so many hierarchies within healthcare that what people up the chain, if you like, think is actually happening, what is actually at the ground level, at the frontline level, and what really is happening are two different things. And so sometimes with all the best intention, there's a concept of making change that isn't actually reflective of the way things are or aren't currently working. It's what they believe is true, not what is really.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's not limited to healthcare. I think that I've seen that in just about any organization where there's a lot of hierarchy. Yep. Thank you for that. All right. There's one more topic in change and the individual, and then we're finished with one of 4 topics. This is a topic of individual differences. So again, what we're doing is we're addressing a number of different elements about individuals and relating them to our understanding of dynamics in the workplace, as well as understanding some of the dynamics that happen person to person when they're confronted with some kind of change. Again, whether it be something that they self-select to do or something that is done with or to them. In terms of individual differences, there are all kinds of different methods to type people or to put them in buckets in terms of their preferences, personality type preferences. So DISC is one. There's one with colors, yellow color, pink color. So different kinds of models. Our book, and therefore our reference in this course, is to talk about the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, also called MBTI, which many of you have probably heard of or maybe even used before. One thing to note about the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator is that you can't just do it and assess people in your organization. It is, you see the registered trademarks there with the both the acronym and the Myers-Briggs spelled out. In order to administer a Myers-Briggs survey, we'll call it a tool or instrument, you must be trained in it and certified by the Myers-Briggs organization. So if you have somebody certified in your organization, that's one thing. Otherwise, you need to pay somebody, an external consultant, or to come in and do that. So another thing with this, and from any tool or model that you might use, it could be kind of tricky with dynamics in terms of using it. So I've seen where some organizations, when you walk in the door first day or first week as part of your new employee orientation, you're given the assessment and you're given your 4-character label. In fact, one of my colleagues said they went to an organization and everybody has their label mounted on their laptop. So they carry it around, and I am a whatever those 4 letters are. I think that, like anything, there's a balance in what we do. And I think we need to understand, well, why do we care, and what would we do with this if we're actually going to go through this in our organization? But it's good for some things, and it might be something worthwhile. I found it more worthwhile in dealing with team dynamics, in terms of, especially if you have teams that aren't getting on so well, to try to help describe what's going on and maybe even how we could see each other in a different light by knowing there's differences and trying to communicate maybe better by having this understanding. So maybe you've used it, maybe you've not. But what this does is it's basing 4 pairs of opposite preferences that people show. And again, this word is preferences. And so it's also, as we go through this, it's not black and white. So it's 4 pairs of opposite preferences. It doesn't mean you're all the way on one side versus the other side. It also doesn't mean really that you have the same preference in every situation, and I'll explain that with me personally as we go through a couple of these. So the first pair, and you know, part of what to know here for even the purposes of an exam that I just really obliterated with this color, is how people are energized. So how people are energized, the labels are extrovert or introvert, E or I. So some people are more energized by the outside world. They like talking with people or being, you know, outside in large settings and listening to people and being sociable, and that's where they get their internal energy. Some people are energized by their inner world. They enjoy their own thoughts and feelings, and they don't need to be around people. They're quite comfortable sitting at home on a Saturday night and enjoying what they like to do. So that's how people are energized. Let's go through all of them, and then we'll do a little of your own personal test or statement. Oh no, we're going to do it now. Got to understand this. So which are you? So put in your little arrow in terms of which are you, E or I. Do we have more E's or more I's in this class, in this team? Look at that. Oh, Sherry, you're right on the line. I think that was intentional too. Kim's right on the line. Yeah, more E's than I's. Yeah, Victor, I got that. You are an E, yeah. Wow, half and half. I actually did the class last week, and there was only a few people in the class, and I was the only E in the class. I'm an E up here. I was the only E in the class. Everybody else was I's. All right, so we got quite a mix of E's and I's. All right, let's go through the next one. The next one is sensing and intuiting. So you see that we normally give this a label with a letter, but we've already used I for introvert, so now intuiting is with an N. So it's S or N, sensing or intuiting. And what this is about is how people process information, which good to know when we are establishing a communication plan for people. So people who consider themselves or who have a preference towards sensing focus more on sensory data pay attention to the detailed facts. They like the details. People who lean more towards intuiting are focused more on interpretations or intuitions. They're a big picture. They like to know why. What's the big picture? All right, I bet you we know what's coming. Oh, no, it didn't come up, so we'll do it again. Which are you? How many sensing, how many intuiting? So Kim, does that mean you really like the big picture? Way up there, big picture. All right, look at this, like half and half again. I'll put me in. I'm here somewhere in the intuiting. This is pretty cool, half and half. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next one. And the next one is thinking and feeling. And what this is about is how people make decisions. So some people who have a preference or a lean towards thinking, or the T, make decisions based on rational thought. They go through the entire logical sequence, and they are really looking for the right answer out of something. There needs to be a right answer. People who are more feeling, their decisions are based more on personal concerns and the feelings of or sensitivity to people involved. You're looking for a widely accepted outcome. So it's the outcome, not necessarily the right answer, like 2 + 2 = 4, but what is the widely accepted outcome? All right, so where are you there? Thinking. Okay. I tend to think more IT people anyway are in the thinking realm and looking for right answers than people who are in the feeling. Okay, Rich, you're there. Yeah. Rich, I got that. All right, and then the last set is judging versus perceiving, or judging or perceiving in the situations people prefer. Some people prefer cut and dry, clear situations, systematic and methodical. So cut and dried, what time are we going to go to the zoo? What time are we going to leave the zoo to come home? What time, which hotel are we going to? So that's more of the judging. P are people prefer more open-ended or ambiguous situations. They're happy with ambiguity. We'll go to the zoo when we get to the zoo. We'll stay as long as we want to stay. I'm not sure which hotel. We'll get there when we get there. We'll figure it out when we get there. All right. Okay, so we're in the first two, the top two, we're kind of split, almost half and half. In the bottom two, there's more people in the first of those two than in the bottom of those two. All right, and so thank you for jumping in and sharing this. Why do you think we would care? Why do you think knowing this? Anybody want to just jump in the chat? Why would we care about knowing this for multiple people in our organization? How to flex a message or approach, yep. Knowing how they think allow you to better communicate with them. Yep, helps with how we communicate and people receive messages. Yeah, so a lot of it is in communications when we're talking about from a change management perspective. Now, I don't think we need to know that Fred is one type and Sam is another type. I think what we need to know from a change management perspective is that a number of types exist, and that we need to make sure that we cater our approach to reflect the different types and give options for the different types to bring them along. So Jose says to establish a strategy on how to approach persons in the organization. Yeah, our strategy in that, and again, I don't think we might know exactly who's who, but I don't think for our perspective it's so necessarily the point in that we need to have options. but it's also in terms of understanding when we see dynamics happening between people, what they're all about. So in this slide here, it says in terms of conflict, many times there's not a conflict because of the people themselves, but it's in the way that they express themselves. So different people might misunderstand each other, and it could be that they are talking at different levels, if you will, in that one's expression is just different than somebody else's. So they could end up in conflict. It's not the content. They might actually agree on the content, but their way of expressing and seeing things might be different that could cause the conflict. Another element is the tendency, though, for complementarity, for people to look for the strengths that each person can contribute to a given situation. And this would be good in building a team, to have people who have different strengths that complement one another, to have a better wealth of personality and therefore the ability to take risks versus not take risks and communicate one way versus another way. And so as long as we value and respect that we have different preferences, a team that has people with different aspects that complement one another could be really good. So here it says if two individuals understand and respect each other's contribution, they make a great team. So we talked in the chat, a lot of what we want to know will be in terms of communications and how we are going to create our strategy for our engagement and our communications with different stakeholders. But another is how we're going to make sure that we've got a great team to manage this change or lead a change of people that have these complementary aspects. I don't know if this has happened to you or if you've ever observed this, but I've observed some managers want to hire people that are just like them. Green check means yes, red X means no. You've seen managers that the people they hire are kind of just like them. Have you seen that? Green check means yes, red X means no. Yeah, and so then what happens? We've got single-threaded thought processes going on, and we don't have people who would even kind of contradict one another for the betterment of the solution or the project or whatever. When I've managed people, my goal was always to look for the people who are different from me, and Rich says no diversity of thought, so that we have diversity of thought. Now sometimes that's really challenging to manage a group of people that way, but the overall outcome is so much better than having groupthink and doing it all one person's way or one set of people's way. All right, so personality, implications for change. Be aware of different preferences in a group to make sure that those who are introverted need time to think. Those who are extroverted, it says, avoid ideas being lost in the flow of ideas from an extrovert, where they get their energy from outside and are just liking to socialize and go from person to person to person, and one idea pops up, and I kind of think these bullets go with some of the other elements too, like thinking versus feeling. But the point being here that we need to be aware there are differences. Don't necessarily have to be aware of who's who, but that there are differences in the group, and we need to make sure that we've got we're providing or allow differences. When communicating change, ensure the vision for change is clear. So for people who are intuitive, we want to provide that big picture. People who want the set of data or facts who are sensing, we need to provide. So we need to provide both to cater to the different personalities that people have. The MBTI provides a useful structure. Now this image here, I actually grabbed off the internet. It's not in our book, and it wasn't in any of the course material content owned by APMG. I grabbed it from the internet because I found it interesting. So those 4 pair of preferences that we just went through, each person is said to have to be more in one camp versus another camp, and therefore they're given a letter, so that you've got 4 letters, and those 4 letters, when you see the label on the laptop or wherever that it says this person is XYZ, this is the set of letters. What I thought was interesting, and again, it's an image I grabbed, so I don't know where these numbers came from, but I saw several images that had very similar numbers, is the percentage of population that is one versus another. I thought was interesting. So actually, I had told you I would share with you in terms of my personality or my experience that one of my letters is J. I am actually ENTJ. And remember what J was? J was that you like things, you like the situations to be cut and dry. You like the timeline. You like to know exactly what's going to happen. I didn't used to think I was a J, but I was actually typed. I through an old team that I was on, and yeah, lo and behold, what I came out with is a J. And I told this to people at Pink Elephant, people up in our corporate office, and one person said, "Yeah, Robin, you are so J." So it's very obvious to some. It killed me because I wanted to be a P. But what I realized is that in my work environment, I am a J. And as was told to me, yeah, you're really a J. In my home environment, I am pretty pure P, where I do like more ambiguity and I do like to kind of just go with the flow of things. So for me, it's situational. And you might experience that yourself in terms of any of these letters and anything that you come across as far as you're concerned. Have you ever been taken the survey and actually received your type? Green check means yes, red X means no. Yeah, a couple of you have. It's painless. It's just answered a bunch of questions that somehow they pull together and come back with, here's your typing. Here's your type. All right. Okay, so that's personality. Just
This was on USA Today and Facebook. Myers-Briggs can help you choose movies.
Oh, really? Well, there you go. Okay, everybody. So you can copy that or download that. We're about to go on a bit of a break. So there you can read the USA Today. All right. I want to give us a break right now. It's 2:12 in Central Time Zone, and we have finished everything that we need for change in the individual, which means when you come back, we're going to take a little 12 or 13 question quiz from sample exam 1 together. So it's 2:13 on my clock. Let's do a 5 minutes. So come back in 5 minutes and I'll put on my coffee cup and I will remember to mute myself and then we'll come back. They're the energy breaks. Re-energize, I guess. Re-energize breaks. All right, thank you. All right, it's your turn. We're going to do we call it a pop quiz. So let's set the stage for this. Again, there are 2 sample exams that are provided to us by Pink Elephant. Sample exam 1 and sample exam 2, cleverly named. We're going to be going through sample exam 1. You're going to be seeing the questions on slides, so you don't have to have that sample exam printed out in front of you unless you choose to do so. A couple things within the exam, the sample exam, and what I've seen of the actual exams. There are 4 sections to the course. The percentage of questions for each of those 4 sections is pretty much right down the line. So it's kind of 25%, 25%, 25%. So it's anywhere between 12 and 13 questions for a given section. There are no trick questions. There are distractors in questions. Another thing about these questions is that this course is foundation, and foundation means high level. So the questions and answers, maybe not worded exactly the same, but content-wise come right from your book and therefore right from our slides, which are geared off of the book. So nothing for you to overanalyze or try to analyze or dig down deep. It's all high level, trying to go to, do you remember what you learned? And can you pick out an answer to a question, even if they kind of scramble around the wording a little bit so that it's not 100% obvious. So we're going to go, in terms of what I'd like to do is, I'm going to leave the question up on the screen, and I'm going to give you, 30 or 40 seconds before I ask anyone to put the answer in the chat. So this way everyone has time. Remember, we learned earlier that everyone learns differently, everyone communicates differently, has different preferences and different absorption. And so therefore we're going to give everybody time to read the question thoroughly, answer it on their own, and then we will ask for answers and we'll go over the question. All right, let me just see if this works. Yeah, it did. All right, give you a couple seconds. All right, I think that's long enough. Using your arrow, where do you think it is? Rich was first. Who agrees with Rich? Yeah, I'd agree with Rich too. So let's look at how this question is actually, how they've framed this question, how this whole thing has worked. And what they have said is basically, and this is something that, well, I do on a paper exam, yours will be electronic. What are the key words in here? They just want to know, do you know the order of the hierarchy of needs, and do you know what each of those represents? And so safety and security go together. You're right, A. What's another word for love in terms of what we learned with Maslow? If you want, you could type either in the chat, or if you want to type right on use your text tool and type right on the screen, you could do that. What's another word for love? Social, I'm seeing. Doug says social. Affection, social acceptance. Yep, so it's all that people to people. And then esteem is about really recognition, and self-actualization is really about mastery, being the best you could be, but being the best you could be in something that's important to you, in something that makes you happy doing that. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next question. Self-worth, yes. Yep. We're going to go on to the next question. And again, I'm going to give you time, and don't put your arrow up until I tell you to. All right. I think that's enough time. Arrows? Yeah. Yep. Very good. Hey, you know what? On a completely different note, I think I might have misrepresented something very first thing this morning, because I just happened to look down at my clock. I think I told you that class goes from 9 to 5 Central Time, and that is a myth. Class goes from 9 to 4 Central Time. It just happens to be 5 for me. So I just wanted to make sure that I cleared that up if I said that incorrectly. Sorry to do that in the exam, but in the middle of our little exam, but I want to make sure that that was known. All right, judging and perceiving. Okay, so that is the right answer. In terms of sensing and intuiting, which of those two would we want to communicate the big picture to? Which of those two? Intuiting. Yep. And sensing wants more of the details. It's really good we've got people that have both. I know that I'm a big picture person and I actually need to have somebody else focus on the details and then just give me the summary. I can't go there. So it's good we have that complementarity. All right, in terms of the other two pair that we didn't do do anything with thinking and feeling, and we didn't do anything with extrovert and introvert yet. For extrovert and introvert, what's the dynamic that we're talking about when we talk about somebody's extrovert or introvert? In what? What's the dynamic? How they are energized, where they get their energy from. All right, what's the dynamic for thinking and feeling? What are we looking at in terms of thinking and feeling? How people do what? Make decisions. Okay. All right. Can't fool you guys and gals. All right, next question. This will take maybe a little bit longer to read. Okay, arrows? Yeah, shorter time. So if we have created that condition and then stopped providing the positive reinforcement, the condition will become extinct or could become extinct. And then when we go to do it again, to start or restart applying that, then it takes a shorter time to relearn that conditioned behavior. Very good. Nothing else actually to say about that. All right, next one. All right, before I have you put your pointer on for this one, I kind of hope that you can eliminate some of these answers and cross them out, leaving only one, a couple of answers, even while having taken this class. Hopefully you could do that, and that could be true with some of your exam questions as well. Where's your arrow? What answer? Yeah. Yeah, so would we recognize negative emotions as a sign of the changes being managed badly? No. I mean, people are going to have negative emotions, especially at the onset of discussing change. Would we advise people not to discuss their problem with colleagues? No, we want people to connect and have that whole social need filled with other people. Do we want to assume that people will eventually move on in time to deal with a change? So actually, one of the things here for the exam is think not what happens currently in our world, but what should happen in our world, because sometimes D is something that does currently happen in our world. Very good. So A was the answer. Off to the next one. Okay, arrows, answers? Performing the tasks to make a change. Okay, so that's change. Okay. Okay, we got some couple of different answers in here. Okay. So I think that we are saying now A and no B. So I'm going to take these off. So we have an A. Okay. So let's talk about this one a little bit more. This is one that we have differences of opinion every time I teach this class. So let's remember that there were two boxes in the slide with the bridges. So this is William Bridges and transition. We had two boxes, and the one box that we had was about the change, and the other box that we had was about the transition. And it's key to know the difference between change and transition. The change is the tasks that we could put in, or the activities that we could put into a project plan. So it's the bare bone, we need to move this, and we need to apply that, and we need to change this instruction. So that's the change. And that all relates to performing the tasks to manage the change. The transition is the psychological process that each individual needs to go through. Some people taking a very short time, some people taking a longer or maybe even a very long time, depending on the situation. And so in transition, what we're actually doing are all of A, B, and C. Adjusting attitude is the individual attitude that each person needs to move individually, one at a time. Being comfortable with new patterns, that again is an individual element. And abandoning the previous patterns of behavior, again, is an individual element. And actually, these three items here go with the three phases of Bridges' model. If you remember his three phases of Bridges' model, the three phases of Bridges' model, it starts with endings, which sounds kind of funny that endings is first, but we start with endings. And what we're doing with the endings is we are doing abandoning the previous behaviors, patterns of behavior. And then what we're doing is we are making the change. And in the change, we're doing A, adjusting the attitude to move to a new approach. And then we're going to the phase of new beginnings. And new beginnings is where we want to have people become comfortable with the new patterns. We want to give them a part to play, a purpose, a picture, and a plan for getting there. So I wanted to point this out with this question that in many cases, the writer of the question, actually in most cases, the writer of the question focuses on one model. So you see in here, it's not answers related to Maslow or Kubler-Ross or anything like that. Everything is related to Bridges. And quite often, the answers that are not correct for this particular question are correct for a different question and align with the opposite of, or if there's multiple choices or multiple bullets with different bullets on the opposite or on the opposite side of the actual thing. So just wanted to point that out, that that's a style of questions. Now, there are times where they are going to mix up approaches. So especially if we're talking about the motivation we talked about, and we had Hertzberg and his intrinsic and extrinsic there, and we had Daniel Pink with his three elements, then they might mix it up, but it's all the same type of thing that they're talking about in that mode. Hopefully that will help you in honing in on that. Keep your eye on the slide 201. Can you enter slide 33? Okay, what done with this pop? You want me to go to 33? Is that what you're saying?
If you, either after you're done with the pop, or, because I'm not connecting the dots between Bridges' stages of transition in slides 32, 33, and what you're saying. What you just said about that answer.
Okay, so endings are letting go of the old ways and the old identity people had. Okay, so the letting go, we'll go back to those answers.
I'm sorry, I don't see the slide yet, but maybe.
Oh,
I see the annotations, unless this is the back thing happening
yeah, I
to me
think
now.
so. Because I see it
Uh,
on my other computer.
Oh, someone said, look at 31. Yeah, that individual max will do
Okay, look at
weird
slide
things.
31.
Something-
Yeah, that's a better one to look at, slide 31. So the definition of change and transition is on slide 31. The actual events, activities and steps that could be put into a project plan.
Thank you. That helps me with that question. Appreciate it, folks.
Yeah, and actually, as Rich asked, let's do this. When you have a question, let's go back and look at it right away. See, I could normally do this in a class. I just flip open the book and show it. So please ask, because that's why we're doing these sample exam questions. And again, you could be questioned on anything, but we've got several slides on this, and this seems to be one of the more well-known kind of models. So I would kind of spend a little time even reading this in the book if you have access to the book. So thank you for asking. All right, and now we'll go to the next question.
Good.
All right, so now we'll go to the next question. Rich, let's just go back. So do you see how A, B, and C go with those three phases now? Abandoning the previous patterns of behavior, C, is the letting go.
Yes, on slide 31, but later I'll, on my own, look at those three slides in sequence, because I thought it took this as more a different
Okay.
way.
Okay,
So
and then
I'm
ask the
fine.
questions later or tomorrow if you need to. All right, question 21, and I'm going to give you a little bit to do this one, little time. All right, let's go. Arrows? All right. Okay, I'm going to clear. So yes, so that is the answer. I'm going to clear the pointers, and I want somebody to go with the highlighter and highlight the key word in here that could help you get to this answer. Take your highlighter. There you go. There you go. There you go. Yeah. Temporary. Temporary. So anytime with the neutral zone, remember, and if you have the book and if you have the chance, read that section in the book that goes through, there's 4 bullets that actually go through the taking a journey. So this is chapter 1, section B, 2.2, part 2.2. And for those who have hard copy, page 15. It's like, however, I could choose to see a journey as a mere inconvenience, an unwelcome interruption to my life. So read that area in there and you'll start to connect maybe more closely to that whole thing of this being temporary to get us from where we're letting go of the old way of doing something to be fully capable of and have adapted to the new way. Good, excellent. All right. Okay, next question. All right. Yeah. Yeah. So A again. Doesn't mean that the answers are going to be all A on your exam. We just had some A's here. Okay. So do you see what they're doing? So again, all of the answers relate to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So they're wanting to know, do you know what this is? And do you know what the levels represent? So B says the need for security will motivate behavior after the need for belonging has been satisfied. In the chat, the need for belonging goes with which level? What's it called in what we learned? Love. So love or social. So first you need to know what need of belonging relates to, and then you need to know the order for you to be able to eliminate B. And then C, rewards based on achievement address a lower all you need is love. Rewards based on achievement address a lower level than the need for social interaction. So rewards based on achievement are what? What would that be? Achievement, recognition. Yeah, I think that would be esteem, self-esteem. All right, and then we know the other two. Physiological needs is the bottom, and then security or safety is the one above that. So they're all related, but to realize potential at the top is the one at the top. All right, here we go. Next one. Answers? Yeah, another A. I don't think they're all going to be A. Another A. All right, we're improving skills. So Dan Pink's 3 motivators are autonomy. Yeah, it would help if they were all A. Yeah. But I don't think so. All right, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And so when we look at some of these others, financial reward, we already talked about when we talked about Hertzberg, that's not one of them. That we said salary, financial reward, that's only a temporary motivator. It's not a long-term motivator, and it doesn't marry to that intrinsic about the work itself. C, hopefully we don't do this. Some people, managers might, but we don't do C, so we could throw that one out. And people are motivated by high levels of direction is completely the opposite of autonomy. All right, okay, SHINE. So remember SHINE, we had learning anxiety and survival anxiety. Go ahead and do this one. I guess you don't even need to read this. You already know the answer is because it's just they're all in a row now. What's the answer? Another A. All right. So Rich, I think you have yours as showing respect for people's attempts to make a change. I think we might want to do we want to do that? Yes. And we actually want to do that, and that's talked about even in the Bridges model of helping people move forward.
Yeah, I thought it was Shine's empathy thing.
Yeah, okay, so SHINE is actually not, so that's Rogers. So
Oh,
after we go through
Rogers.
SHINE, so
The
Rogers
nature
is the
guy?
empathy. Yeah, so let's just, so we have everything in front of us. So let's go back, just so we could, because this is all kind of neat stuff, how it all relates together, but in your questions, it's going to be related to the author as well. So SHINE talks about the learning anxiety and survival anxiety. So first, after we've helped people through learning and they just have closed down and they can't get beside themselves or they can't move forward themselves, then what we're doing is this kind of might seem like nasty stuff. Actually, somebody in one of my classes talking about his teenagers said tough love. This is a tough love bit. Disconfirmation, current positions not sustainable, creation of guilt or anxiety. If I don't change, bad things will happen to either me, my team, or my organization. So we can have guilt about the organization as well. And then the creation of psychological safety. And then we moved on to Rogers. And with Rogers is where we said really how we're creating that psychological safety in these things about establishing the relationship: congruence, unconditional positive regard, and empathy. So this question, now I forget which one it was, which slide it was. We'll find it.
205.
Thanks. This question goes with shine. And what it's doing is this whole thing of the making them feel that if nothing changes, that it's not sustainable and the organization could fail. Showing respect for people would be Rogers and their attempts. Does that make more sense now?
Yes, thanks.
You're welcome. If you had weeks to memorize all of this, it would make a lot of sense. All right, 37. Answers? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's kind of cut and dry, that one. Memorize that one. All right, I'm going to move on then. 41. Yeah, it was another A. Remember, these aren't in order because we pulled them out of the exam. Okay, before you answer this one, are there two that you can eliminate right away? Oh yeah, the answer to that was yes. So which two? Both with competence, or with both with competence. That's not the two I was thinking of. Yeah, so feeling frustrated, A and D, yeah. So feeling frustrated means you've got to have that they're feeling frustrated about their lack of skills and they're conscious about it, in which case A and D are out. And so then B was your answer. I know you guys are saying move on with it. All right. Okay, 45. Answers? All right. This is a professional conference. So professional conference, reading books, looking at the internet, researching yourself really goes mostly with the abstract conceptualization. And a person, the label given for abstract conceptualization is a theorist. That label given by the Honey and Mumford duo. All right, so that's it for those questions. How did we do? You feeling good about it? Green check means yes, we're feeling good. Yeah. All right. I didn't say red X. I didn't want anybody to not feel good about these. getting these done. Okay, we're moving on. We finished changing the individual and having an understanding of how individuals go through change. There's psychological concept of going through change, and the process that individuals go through change is important for us to know as we move into creating strategies and communication plans and change management plans and all of that. It's also important for us to know about organizations and the dynamics of organizations. So we're going to talk about how we think about change, organizational culture. There's some models of change process, emergent change. We're just going to get into this a little bit today in the next hour and a bit that we have left, and then we'll keep working on this tomorrow. So rather than go through these bullets, we'll go through our learning objectives. We should be able to discuss the value of using images or metaphors to think about dynamics of organization. And I'll tell you who Morgan is pretty soon as into this. We need to know specifically 4 metaphors as described by Morgan in terms of defining or describing organizational dynamics. Then we're going to go through a couple of different models or processes. So Kurt Lewin's 3-stage planned change model. Kotter's 8-step is really, it's a process. I don't know if I'd call it a model. It's a process along with another set of research and documentation that Kotter has been looking at more recently. This is John Kotter in terms of what he calls a dual operating system. And then we're going to talk about dynamics of organization and explaining kind of different phenomena in organization through what Peter Senge thinks of or has written about is in terms of systems thinking. So all of those different authors of and fathers of different change processes and perspectives. We'll talk about different roles in the process. So these are roles. We're not going to give you a detailed description or job description of a change manager. That would be a job, and the job descriptions are really different organization to organization. So in addition to a change manager, what roles are needed as part of the change team? So we'll talk about change sponsor, change agent, and line manager in particular. We'll talk about culture, organizational culture, and how it develops. We'll talk about this concept of emergent change, and this kind of tailors to or aligns with the Peter Senge systems thinking. So we'll tie all of that together, and we'll talk about vision and a little bit in terms of challenges of writing vision and pitfalls in a written vision statement. All right, give me a second. There's a file I think I want to go get that I didn't load, so I'll be 1 second till I get that if I have it. And just to help with this. All right. We're talking about how we think about change in organizational metaphors. All of this comes from a book written by an author by the name of Gareth Morgan, and this is listed in your book. The book is called Images of Organization. You want a break? Yeah, Chuck says break. I'm good with that as we're changing topics. Okay, 5 minutes. And again, the book, Gareth Morgan. In Gareth Morgan's book, he writes about 8 different metaphors or images to explain dynamics that happen in organizations. For those of you who are looking along in the in our course book, in the book that goes with this class, what you're going to be looking for or looking at is a table. It's table 1.5. It's on pages 38 and 39. I'm sorry, that's Kotter. Table 1.4, pages 33, 34, 35. And it's chapter 1, section C is in Charlie, and part 1 is the table. In this table is listed actually 9 metaphors, 8 written by Gareth in his book, plus an additional written by another researcher author. Due to our syllabus, we need to know four of these 9 metaphors. So we need to know machines, brains, which are on the first page of this table, political systems, and flux and transformation, which are on the second page of this table. The others are listed here, but you don't need them for this particular syllabus, for this particular course. So first of all, the word metaphor, when I ask people to describe the word metaphor, sometimes people get tripped up on what is a metaphor. And so let's try and make this somewhat easy for ourselves so that we all have a common understanding. So a metaphor is one thing is like another thing. So it's not one thing is another thing. It has different similarities. So in terms of this diagram, the similarities are right here in terms of, man versus lion. Here's the similar aspects. Oops, I went overboard. Of man, not versus. Man is like a lion. So how about taking a piece of real estate and typing in some of the things or characteristics that a man and a lion might have in common? Go ahead, put your mammal. There's 2 mammals. Yep. Yep, more mammals. Anything else? Courage, bravery. Yeah. Mane. Yeah. Have a heartbeat, breathing. Okay, maybe strong. That's a courage, brave. All right, so you see that's what we're looking at. So when Gareth Morgan is talking about these metaphors, he's just saying an organization is like one of these earthlings, one of these metaphors, and it's just for the people who are leading change, for the people who are talking about organization and really organization dynamics, is helping understand organization in an imagery type way. So let's go back to our slide now and start looking at the 4 types of organizational metaphors that Gareth Morgan has described in his book. The first that he talks about, there's actually more content in the table on page 33 or location 1398, thank you, Chuck, than what's in here, but we'll describe what this is. So the first for us to talk about is organizations as machines. And so he's talking about the dynamics of organization that is machine-like, routine, hierarchical in structure, very controlling. In our slide, can be designed and controlled. Because it's very repetitive and routine, change can be planned and managed. When we think of an organization like a machine, it would be, the component of an organization that might be one that the people in the organization follow, explicit directions. So explicit directions to file an order, explicit directions to, and specialized directions to do something in one segment of the organization versus in another segment of the organization. Organizations as machines are companies like fast food companies. So if you think of McDonald's, I haven't been there in so long, so I just have to imagine this. Going to a McDonald's, the employees there don't think about how much soda or pop or Coke or whatever you want to call it goes into a cup. They just push a button and 12 ounces comes out or 20 ounces comes out or whatever the increment is. Organizations as machines started way back even before Henry Ford, but even imagine Henry Ford and an assembly line looking at specialization and routine to do the same steps over and over and over again. So that's the dynamic when we describe an organizational component or dynamic as organizations as machines. In terms of this is very much American management methodology and was started as American methodology, again, even back before Henry Ford. It's very bureaucratic, it's very controlling of an organization. And try as we might in many organizations, we talk about flattening the organization, getting rid of levels of management. Our thought process oftentimes reverts to this, even though we try something different. The second type of metaphor that you need to know is organization as brains. I don't really like the bullets here. This is in your book. Intelligence-led, resemble a library and memory bank. Change is seen as a learning process. So when we think of organizations as brains, we think more of the total quality organization, continual learning organizations, self-managed teams that are innovative. And actually, when we think of organizations as brains, it is more related to the Japanese management style, where we have Kaizen, or which is continual learning, or we have Gemba, which is walk around and learn what is actually going on within the workplace. Some of the language that you'll see particularly in exams with organizations as brains is talking about organizations in terms of a learning organization having good feedback mechanisms. In terms of looking at the Japanese style of management, asking why, instead of just following the same prescription or the prescriptive steps over and over again, even if they don't work, challenge if they don't work and ask why. So you see, and I'm changing slides again, I'm going back over to our man. In terms of feedback systems, what we think about is what they call a double loop feedback system. In the American management style or the machine management style, what we actually see is a single feedback system. So we go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 and then back to step 1. What this means, an example of this could be if I have a set of instructions, well, an example of this or the way to talk about this is step 1 is a person is constantly aware of what's going on around them. If they see something that needs attended to, or if they're given a set of tasks that they need to do, the first thing that they do is they check in their mind, now how am I supposed to do this? What's my rules for doing this in this organization? So that's step 2, checking for the procedure to do it. And then step 3 is actually taking the action. In a double loop feedback system, when we get to step 2, we actually go out to step 2A. It looks like my arrows are a little funny. We go out to step 2A, and 2A is where we look at those procedures or those steps to do something. And if it doesn't seem quite right, it's not efficient, it's not right, we challenge it and we might change our mode of doing things, and then we go to step 3. And my arrows are out of whack. Use my pink arrows instead. Here's an example of this is not related to work. A story that you can Google and find on your own, and maybe some of you've heard this story before. It's called the ham and pan story. The ham and pan story is we have a mother and daughter over a Sunday dinner or whatever, a big dinner that has family members there. And the woman is making ham. She gets the ham out of the refrigerator. The first thing she does is she cuts off the both ends of the ham and then puts it in the pan. The daughter says, "Mom, why did you do that? Why did you cut off both ends of the ham?" And the mother says, "Well, I don't know. I learned to do this from Grandma, and Grandma always did that." So of course Grandma's there, big family thing, and so they say, "Let's ask Grandma." And Grandma says, "I don't know why we cut off the ends of the ham. My mother taught me to do that, and so that's why I did it." So what do? They ring up the nursing home where great grandma is, and they say, "Why did you cut off the ends of the ham?" And great grandma says, "Well, when I was first married, I had a pan to put the ham in, and the ham didn't fit in the pan. So I had to cut off both ends to make the ham fit in the pan." And so this has been carried down generation to generation, and nobody asked why until this daughter asked why in step 2, do we do this when it really doesn't make sense to us? So hopefully you can see dynamics in your organization where some people follow the set of procedures because that's what they've been given and that's what they're expected to do and don't ask why. And you've got others who ask why and challenge the status quo to see if there's a better way. That whole notion of double feedback loop and getting feedback to become a learning organization maps to organizations as brains. All right, the third that you need to know is organizations as political systems. And this is probably pretty easy for us to pick out. And I don't mean bad as political systems. It could get bad, but it's not necessary. In political systems, what we're looking at is we've got different factions, and we've got people who have power that are representing conflicting needs of various groups. And I think of the show Survivor with this. The power changes. You know, Survivor, they create alliances and somebody's powerful and then they disband and they create new alliances. So change depends on aligning various sources of power for support. So there's more to read about political systems in your book. These are the entities that are at a high level. And then finally, organizations in flux and transformation. What this is saying is organizations are constantly changing. I think it was Rich, you early on, like really early this morning, we're talking about external things that happen in organizations that create the need for change. So because of all of the different dynamics going on in organizations, what we're saying here is managing change and controlling change through a structured change management plan isn't always possible. Different things get in the way. Different dynamics actually kind of morph our organization during a change that makes different impacts on our change plan as we're trying to go through it. So this is through chaos and complexity. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more tomorrow. But hierarchy and control have limited relevance because of the dynamics that are shifting the sands, we will, of the organization. Managing change in the strict sense is impossible. Managing changes by maybe many incremental changes over time. And what this is saying is that leaders can nudge the organization in different ways to get to a desirable outcome. But it's more nudging and looking at dynamics, how different cycles take place of dynamics in how that change is actually carried out. We're going to talk about these again in terms of talking about the models that we mentioned, the Kotter model, talking about Peter Senge. So these will come back and we'll go back and forth in terms of explaining them. Before I move on, do you have any questions about what I said about each of these four? It'd be a good time to raise your hand and ask. You probably don't even know what to ask at this point. We're going to dance around these or circle around these again tomorrow morning as we talk about those other models. It's probably late in day for you too. All right, so we now learned about what are these four metaphors that you need to know. Why do we use them to manage change? It's by helping to identify the patterns of organization through imagery or through metaphor. It shows us that the same structured change management planning type doesn't work for all changes, doesn't work for all environments. And so using the ability to show imagery or tell stories or create a metaphor to help understand dynamics of an organization helps us understand what works and what doesn't work, or the dynamics when we set out for a planned change on why it might not be going exactly as we expected or planned. These four, or if you will, 8 metaphors, they're not the only metaphors. You can come up with your own metaphor for describing organizations. and by doing so, providing a framework for thinking about a particular change. Which metaphors provide the best insights to issues? So if we're an organization that is under constant change from both internal and external internal pressures, like that of flux and transformation, performing a very rigid, structured change management planned project like we could more easily do in the metaphor of a machine might not work as we expect it. So it helps explain those insights, helps us understand change from different perspectives, and maybe help us understand that even the same change project has to allow for different dynamics in different parts of the organization in order to be successful overall. It offers a way of considering different approaches by different authors. So kind of said that the Kotter model, which is a very structured process, doesn't work well for a more fluid type of organization, where that very structured process works extremely well for an organization that is very routine and hierarchical, in that we've got some, we could replace one set of instructions for one part of the organization relatively easily compared to some of the other types that we talked about. So this is something for you to read down here with Morgan. This is actually in your book at the bottom of the table, at the very end of the table. So he's saying his aim or goal is to reveal through illustration or imagery or metaphor in shaping organizational management. The ultimate challenge is not to be seduced by the power of a single metaphor. It's just to develop the ability to integrate contributions of different points of view. So one size does not fit all in the world of change, which is what this is really talking about. Questions about this? Just so you know, Morgan's book, Images of Organizations, about 500 pages. And so that, therefore, there's about 50 pages allocated to each of these 8 metaphors. From our perspective, and in our book, you've got it in a table, a really condensed summary of what they are. But it's pointed out here, really, for what I said, is it's not a one-size-fits-all in terms of change. No questions? We're good? Okay, I'm going to go beyond the group discussion and talk about culture. Okay, another author. So what we're doing, I think you've noticed already, is we're going through a lot of different authors, researchers, leaders of some of these areas of content. Again, I'm telling you the book titles. You don't have to go read all of these books, but I'm telling you for, potentially your future interest. The names of the books, again, are listed in our book at the end of this section. So this diagram of culture and this description of culture as 3 different levels comes from these authors, Trumpeniers and Hamden Turner, in a book that they have written called Riding the Waves of Culture. And a lot of their work or their research was done even in tribes of people together and looking at cultural differences and across tribes and how tribes of people relate to one another. That work's been carried out into organizations, and for us, simply put, is looking at culture as 3 different levels. Level 1 is the surface level or the outer circle here. And what they're saying is that elements of culture for the outer circle are visible. So the visible artifacts and products, and typically what goes with status, who gets what. In this example, we're talking about, and in your book it talks about things, like who gets the corner office, who gets a high back chair. But it's also things like who gets, large bonuses, what status do people have in the organization that provides different things for them? Who's in the old boy network of the organization? So it is visible, whether it be, that you could touch or feel it, but it is visible that you see these different artifacts that are really describing who's who ranks in the organization. The second level, or the inner circle here, the second circle in, is an element of culture that we talk about in terms of norms and values. Norms are, and you don't even know difference exactly between norms and values, but norms are our shared meaning of what's right or wrong when we work together in this organization. Values are a shared meaning of something that we consider good or bad when we work together in this organization. So norms and values could be something like we are direct, open, and honest with each other in this organization. And anybody who doesn't espouse to those norms and values, it's obvious that they are not following what we believe is the way we should behave and the way we work together and the way we think about customers and all within our organization. Norms and values could be documented in your HR manual, or oftentimes you see the values of our organization as a poster up on a wall. I was in a building recently, and it was, I don't know how many stories, like a 6-8 story building, and when you got off the elevator, on every floor there was a big marquee kind of thing that said the values of our organization are boom, 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 boom. So they are stated, they are documented. It's our way to work together in this organization. And then the deepest are our basic assumptions. So level 3 are basic assumptions of what we mean as an organization. So in this it says seldom articulated, but underpin the norms and values. So the assumption that all people are created equal, the assumption that customer service and customer delight or satisfaction comes before profit is a basic assumption of some organizations. Now, what happens if we get so say our basic assumption in an organization, the way we've operated for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years we've worked for this organization is that we will cater to customers and customer satisfaction comes first and over profits. What happens if new management comes in and starts saying, well, let's cut the corner on this and let's not worry, let's extend our time to get back to customers from 10 minutes to 2 hours. What might happen in that organization if the culture is tested that way? Anybody want to kind of just jump in and say what they've seen or what they've felt or what they've heard or what they've experienced? Must be getting late for everybody. All right, nobody's jumping in. All right, well, I would think that most people would be saying, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? So people will be confused. Resistance, okay, yeah, confused, what happened? And maybe resistant to that new management and maybe enforce resistant to that new management and make it very uncomfortable situation. All right, so how does culture develop in an organization? So it could develop in many ways. Through an organization's history, so particular assumptions, values, and norms will have led to success. It's often the assumptions of the founder or leaders, or maybe someone who has been with the organization for a long, long time and has risen from maybe being a hero in the organization. Lessons about what really matters sink deeply into the organizational unconscious, and there's a key thing, unconscious is shaping the future behavior from beneath. So what really matters is going down to those assumptions. Customers matter, or how we relate to each other in terms of maybe direct, open, and honest really matters in an organization. Change may threaten this unconscious system, and therefore we would get resistance to the change. And so what we need to know as change managers is we need to be able to describe all 3 levels of culture in the organization. Again, some of it unconscious, so that we can be sensitive to what we are attempting to change and make sure that it's the right thing to do. Here it's saying the ability to bring culture to organizational consciousness. So if the organization can't, maybe the culture does need to change, but if it's if we are unconsciously working through this culture, we probably won't have the ability to describe it or to figure out what's changing and where resistance comes from. So we need to be able to tease it out, if you will, and make sure that the group of people we're working with can talk about both those things that are seen and those things that are assumed as culture. And then we could discuss the relevance to current needs and what is the right thing to do and what will be rejected or how to manage something that might be rejected. And then finally, we could craft key messages in a way that supports the change. So basically, this is saying don't go in like a bull in a china shop, or don't go in with your eyes closed, or the organization with their eyes closed to what's really going on in the organization. We need to bring it to light so we can discuss it and make sure that we're managing it well. Here's a statement that our friend Shine wrote in one of his books, and this is something that you should look through. This is saying identifying the strands of organizational culture requires careful collaboration. So it's not one person going off in a corner trying to describe culture. We need people from different parts of the organization who might be experiencing some differences in culture where they come from. So it's collaboration between those inside the organization, well embedded in culture, plus and someone external who can see the assumptions insiders are making. So someone that can see the forest through the trees, I guess that I will say there, that aren't so close to the situation that their assumptions can't surface to be able to describe what's going on. All right, so that's how culture develops, how we identify culture in an organization. How is it shaped and communicated? I've not read this particular book by Carolyn Taylor. Carolyn Taylor is owns a consulting company, I think maybe in the UK. I looked her up one time and read a little bit about her, but I didn't read this particular book, which is called Walking the Talk, Building a Culture for Success. But in her book, she talks about 3 mechanisms in which culture's messages are communicated. So some of them are conscious, some of them aren't necessarily so conscious by leaders in particular. But culture is communicated by leaders' behaviors. So it's how they behave, what they say, what they do. We are constantly looking at the CX, the CXO, the CEO, the CIO, and we are tailoring our response, and we're also tailoring what we do then based on what we're seeing and hearing from them. So there's a couple of examples in your book, but one of the examples that they provide is if the leader typically follows up on commitments, they're going to produce a culture of accountability in an organization. If a leader is typically looking at and having informal conversations with people at all levels, they might engender a culture that is more open to sharing information with leaders as well as with peers. So that's helping to propagate what's going on in an organization. Symbols is the second. So remember 3 things. Symbols in the paragraphs in your book all tie to patterns. So the first item says patterns, but they're all related to patterns that we see. So patterns on how leaders use their time and resources. Rituals, which are patterns. If we have informal meetings around the water cooler, or if the leader is, or the leaders of the organization are what I'll call sitting in the ivory tower, or they're on the 4th floor that nobody else can go to. versus if they walk around and talk with people and communicate with people at all levels. This is helping to shape and communicate. This is what our culture looks like here. Storytelling, defining moments of organization's history. So if we're an organization that 20 years ago, we were the underdog, but we outperformed our competition and our competition's now gone and we're the best now. That's the kind of storytelling that will occur over and over again, kind of indicating to the organization, this is how we come together. This is how we worked hard together to succeed and be even more competitive. And then the last thing that actually shapes or communicates culture, she calls systems. So it's those systems like our yearly evaluation systems, our HR systems, our personnel systems, how we measure and reward people and teams, and how people feel is fair or not fair in those different systems that help to shape or communicate. This is the type of of culture that exists in our organization. So again, talking about culture, culture is a big thing in an organization. Some of it very obvious and in a sense tangible, some of it assumptions. So in engaging in any change which touches culture, we need to look at all of these different things or be rejected maybe right away. You might have heard when people talk about culture eats strategy. We'll go a step further and we'll say, culture eats strategy and has change for lunch, or for dessert, let's say, because our change initiatives can be easily killed by the culture of the organization if we're not careful about it. In your book, it talks about culture and climate, and just saying it's not one and the same. So culture is long-term and kind of, in many senses, hard to change or hard to move because of it being long-term. And climate is kind of like what's going on today, if you will. And so, you don't need to know much more beyond this. It's just stating that there are differences, and you might hear this term climate somewhere in your organization. And so climate conditions are influenced in part by underlying culture. The first bullet, it reflects current feelings and perceptions of key stakeholders, and it's more open to medium-term fluctuations where culture is something, again, that is long-term. All right, leadership and culture. And I haven't said anything about page numbers recently, just in case you haven't been finding it yourself. We're in chapter 1, section E, and at the moment we're at the bottom of page 65, part 4, leadership and culture. So I like this. I love this statement, actually. Again, by our friend Edgar Schein. The primary, possibly the only function of organizational leadership is to establish, maintain, and evolve the organization culture that best allows the organization to perform effectively. Isn't that beautiful? That's what leaders should do. In other words, they should establish the culture, they should develop the right people, and they should kind of get out of the way. I think, to me, that's what that statement's making. In terms of leadership doing that well, they need to note, again, as we mentioned before, that everything that they do and say is being looked at and weighed and measured by everybody in the organization. So they need to be sensitive to how their messages are being sent and delivered at all times. Do they reflect the culture of the organization? And we're not just talking communication, but their decisions that they make, are they in tune with and aligned with the culture in the organization? This is where we hopefully can jump in. Sometimes leaders don't want people to come and try to coach them or to point out things that we see that they're doing that might be confusing people or might lead to people not thinking that they're authentic or have integrity in their day-to-day activities. So we're used to this. We can see this. We're usually addressing the operational issues. Maybe we can help them with their messaging to make sure, especially the leader who's the sponsor of our change programs, to make sure that they are walking the talk and following through decision and communication and action, time in and time out. So over and over again. Any questions about culture? Or any comments or any feedback you want to talk about relative to the 3 levels of culture and what we just talked through? Feel like I might have got sped up a little bit.
I just would want to say back a couple of slides, the Taylor slide.
Yeah, let me get there.
There. That works the way it's listed is very positive, of course,
Yes.
ways there, but it works in a negative way also when management says do this but does something else.
Exactly.
So it leads to my favorite expression of all time relate to management. What you're doing is so loud I can't hear what you're saying.
I love that, Rich. I love that. Actually, in the book, it has some of the negative elements. Like it says, favoritism not based on performance produces politics. Now, the others are positive. So, yeah, we give them a positive. But I really love what you just said. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. And actually, we put in the positive, but unfortunately, in many instances, it's the negative that stands out more, as you're pointing out. Okay. Bear with me while we kind of muddle on a little bit longer. I'm going to go past this discussion point, and we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to talk about one model of change so that we could kind of keep up where we need to be by the end of today. We're getting there. Getting there. There are many, many models, approaches, methods, processes, etc., for implementing change or for really managing change. One of the authors that we'll discuss tomorrow of a book and articles is by the name of Burns. And he's boiled it down to and basically said there's planned change, which you have more capability of managing and controlling and more for that organization that behaves or the dynamics more like a machine. And then there's emergent change. And emergent change is the whole systems thinking approach. We're going to cover these 3 authors of change processes or in terms of systems thinking with Peter Senge, looking at dynamics of organization. So we're going to hopefully get through Lewin's 3 stages today, and then we'll jump in and start with Cotter tomorrow morning. Okay. All right, so this is going to look somewhat familiar to you because we've discussed a similar concept, but at an individual level. Earlier, when we talked about my good friend, because I like his book, I don't know him, my good friend, Bridges. 3 stages. Now let me go back and kind of mention Lewin again. So if you remember earlier today, I said Lewin is someone who actually was looking at and studying prejudice. And it was around the Hitler area looking at the whole prejudice component. And so what he's talking about really here is a culture. And so the 3 stages are unfreeze, change, and refreeze. In terms of the unfreeze, it's unfreezing the culture as it exists today. And then in terms of the refreeze, it's refreezing the new way of doing things into the culture, the new behaviors, attitudes, and processes into the culture. And then in the middle of that is the change, a period of confusion, challenge, because we're kind of in the middle of, just similar to Bridges, in the middle of some ambiguity and not knowing exactly how things will work once we get everything into the new way of doing things. In Lewin's three-stage model, in terms of the unfreeze, he says there's three steps to it. We'll call it steps in this case. And those steps are to define the current situation. So how do we operate today? What do we look like today? And for those of you who are following along in the book, we're on page 37, which is chapter 1, section C, as in cat or Charlie, and 2.1 starts this. So we define the current situation. We create a vision of the desired state. So this looks like a lot of different projects. What's the as is and what's the to be? But then his is a little different. It says identify the forces that help drive and resist the change. And you're going to see how that plays out pretty soon. All right. In terms of unfreezing, what we're trying to do is breaking the status quo, moving us beyond the way we do things today. So it says there, inertia is overcome and existing habits and mindsets are broken down. We're a do the same thing all the time, the same way we do it, kind of, the homogeneity of the way we work. We need to get that out of the way before we can actually change. So this kind of ties into what we learned before from Shine. So collective mindsets and practices of a group must be broken down before a change can occur. Shine built his disconfirmation and guilt or anxiety on top of the Lewin's unfreeze stage. In truth be told, I would say just about any change project or change model that you see somewhere foundationally can tie back to this unfreeze, change, and refreeze in terms of planned change. All right. In terms of breaking inertia, so the step one, the unfreeze or phase one, clearly define the current situation. And again, the more we can draw on people, the better. And I forget, someone said early on, I'm not sure, Sherry, Alice, if it was one of you, had said that you involved people in the change, and that's what made it successful. So the more, we can't involve everybody, we'd never get anywhere, but the more collaborative we can make it, the better. And the more people are part of the picture they define, the easier it is to get them to commit. Create a vision of the desired end state. Again, get people to contribute. The more people, the better. Again, there's the balance. And then we could have the better you can describe the end state, the richer, fuller, more attractive you can make it, the easier it is going to be for people to let go of the way they currently work, the current culture and work behaviors and attitudes in the organization. And then we're going to talk about this thing called a force field analysis technique that Lewin has created, and it's to identify forces that help to drive the change forward or resist the change. These are typically forces that are together keeping the status quo or the way we're doing things at equilibrium and in balance, so that therefore it's hard to make change happen. Think of tug of war with these different forces that are actually opposing or on the other side of each other. So this force field analysis technique, it's actually in a different section of the book, but we pulled it forward because it goes with this. So figure 2.7, page 94. You can see, you can Google this force field analysis technique, and you'll see different kinds of images looking pretty much like this one. So basically what it's saying is this current state requiring change. That's what's at equilibrium, and something that we need to find ways to move beyond so that we can push the change forward. And that's the push the change forward is over here. That's where we want to go, forward, forward, forward. So in an exercise with pulling people together, as many as is practical together from different parts of the organization, we would want to do a brainstorming maybe for a particular change. What are those things that are that are a reason to do it, that would drive it forward, such as better customer satisfaction might be a driving force. Saving money or making more money might be a driving force. So they would, knowing these would promote wanting to do the change or making it desirable to do the change. And then listing what are some restraining forces. So restraining forces here, what's attempting to maintain the status quo? I have to take training and don't want to take training. That could be a restraining force. This is the way we've always done it and the way we always want to do it. If it's not broke, don't break it. Those are kind of things that can be restraining forces. So we list them and show visually, you can list them on a table or wherever, but if you show them visually, it helps in people see that these things that are opposing one another are preventing us or are slowing us down in making this change happen. So what do we want to do in terms of once we list and we understand these, we want to figure out what can be a mitigation strategy or an activity or task to augment the driving force. Maybe it's communicate or better communicate the desired state. Maybe it is, find ways that we could even save more money. So how could we augment the driving force? And we need to look at strategies for how we reduce or eliminate the resisting force. Maybe to reduce the resisting force, we can demonstrate how we're providing training and it doesn't take that much time to go to training, let's say, to do the new activity, to do the new thing. So this is our goal in this type of model, looking at the force field analysis in helping to break down the current way of doing things. This is pretty neat. I think it's pretty neat because picture says 1,000 words. Questions or comments? Okay. All right, with the change then, we want to take people through the change. So we need a good plan to implement the change. We want to give people the safe learning environment as Shine has described, so that they know that they have coaching available to them. They have the different modes of learning available to them. We're going to help them through this. We want to allow people experimentation over solutions so that, our solution sometimes doesn't understand exactly how things work in other parts of the organization. So let's experiment and make sure that we could all understand the solution and improve upon it where need be, and provide great role models with whom people can identify. Role models could be people who are that they report to, or the executives. Great role models could be their peers who have maybe already gone through the change. That will help people understand how to get there and help them through that. And then refreeze is where we want new work habits to become, new practices to become new work habits. Becomes part of the DNA, conventional wisdom. Kind of a vulnerable time where we can slip back to the old ways if we don't have our eye on everything at all times. So a time for vigilance for change leaders who must address the tendency for people to think the old way. This is where we can reward behaviors and results that are aligned with the change environment. We could even reward trying something new. Maybe it's not perfect, but if it's a behavior or attitude that is helping somebody move into our new direction, let's give them a clap of the hands. Let's keep them moving forward. Help them out. All right. It's 10:05, my time, 10:04 Central Time. Karen's getting ready for breakfast, I guess, her time, or maybe it's post-breakfast, her time. We're going to stop at this point, but you have some homework to do. My challenge with the homework that I'm giving you is I would have wanted to get through Kotter's 8-step model and did not. So I have a set of exam questions, and I haven't had the time to go through and say which of these exam questions did we not cover today. So I'm going to give them to you all anyway. And if there's an exam question about Cotter, give it a try. Maybe look ahead in your book, but be cognizant of the fact that we didn't cover it, and so therefore don't be upset if you don't understand it or don't get it. So for homework, what I'd like for you to do is review what we covered today, and while you're doing that, before you go to sample exam 2, write down any questions that you have. So if you don't write them down, you'll probably forget them between today and tomorrow. So write them down and have them ready. We'll cover those first. And then when you've done that, go through the sample exam questions. And so you don't have this particular slide, so I don't know if you want to copy these down. Take your phone and take a picture of the screen. And again, this is sample exam 2 that you can get from the e-room where you've logged in before if you haven't already downloaded this. Okay, one more thing to do while you're writing those down. And you could put this, how did today go for you? Too fast, too slow, just right? Can you give me a little bit of feedback so I know how to adjust how we're working tomorrow? So Alice says, is there any way to know which parts of the books we covered in order to read them tonight? The page numbers are in the study guide. So if you go to the study guide and you'll see what we covered because it goes in order, and then look at the page numbers. Will that help you, Alice? No, that's a typo. Thank you. Thank you. You don't need to answer 34 and 41 2 times. I forgot about that. I need to get our product team to change that. So you've got fewer questions than actually is listed there. Thank you, Kim, for pointing that out. Doug and Chuck said good pace, just right. Okay, all right. Okay then, I want to thank you for your attention today, and I hope that you have a good evening. Sorry to give you homework, but it goes with the training, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I'm going to stay online here for a bit in case anybody has any questions. I know a few of you had to come and go a little bit today, so I'll hang out here for the next 10-15 minutes or so in case anybody has anything they want to stay and talk about.